legend on the drums, Mr. Nasser Aberde. Test, test. Okay, I had just say thank you to Ryan Williams here. I had a whole intro that I was going to introduce our guest, so he's already done that. Okay, so we're not going to do that. So I'm just going to say, come on up now, Mr. Brett Hayes and Mr. Henry Threadgill. Come on up to the.
Use that instead of? Okay. Can you hear me? All right. They're drawn from two sections of the book. The book is, in some ways, many books within one. It's a travel narrative. It's an autobiography of a composer. It's a book about Chicago, about New York. But it's also, especially in 2.5 chapters, a Vietnam narrative. And we can talk more about Henry's service during the war, but I'm going to read one section from the Vietnam chapters. The Tet Offensive wasn't the only time Narcisse saved my life. There were lots of things that could get you in Vietnam. Beyond the war itself, it was almost laughable sometimes how many threats the environment could throw at you. There were poisonous snakes and foot-long centipedes and vicious wild monkeys and nefarious booby traps in the jungle. Coleman and I would sometimes get assigned to guard duty at what we called Titty Mountain, a bulbous hill formation near Pleiku where there was a radio unit. Up there, you'd often find yourself waist deep in water all night, fighting off endless phalanxes of mosquitoes. You'd hear rats trying to gnaw their way into the bunker. It was miserable. Compared to that shit, the guys would joke, trading a few bullets with Charlie would be a relief. Stuck in situations like that for hours with nothing to do, I had plenty of time to reflect. Being in Vietnam threw some of my near-death experiences back in Chicago into perspective. Once, I was sitting there, staring out at nothing, and I remembered a concert I'd done in Indiana with some singers from the Church of God. I drove down from Chicago with JoJo Morris and a few other women to do a show at Anderson College. We came back that same afternoon. People sometimes forget that starting back in the 1920s, Indiana was one of the main hotbeds of the resurgent Ku Klux Klan. In the early 60s, the state map was still pockmarked with sundown towns, where blacks were given to know, sometimes with explicit warning signs at the city limits, that although they might pass through, they weren't welcome after nightfall. We were on a dusty rural highway on the way back from Anderson when we noticed that we were being followed by another car. It was hugging our tail close enough that we could see the faces of the 4 white men inside. They were all carrying rifles. No words were exchanged, but there was no need to say anything. Their stony faces and the aggressive way they were driving communicated the threat clearly enough. I was at the wheel and I remember the anxiety mounting as they rode up on me and forced me to go faster and faster. Finally, I made a screeching turn into a side road that ran through a cornfield, and the sedan didn't follow us. The white men gave us a pointed look as they sped by. I was trying to play it cool, but JoJo and the other church women were beside themselves. I pulled over and waited for the dust to settle before we took off again, but we didn't linger in Madison County. Unsettling as that episode had been, in some ways American racism was easier to deal with than the unfamiliar menace of Vietnam. Back in the US, racism was omnipresent, so it became a fixture in our lives, just one of those things we took for granted in the atmosphere. Although threats would loom up unexpectedly once in a while, we generally learned how to avoid certain kinds of risk. Black people developed an entire arsenal of subtle strategies that almost became second nature. But in Vietnam, it seemed like there were all sorts of unimagined dangers ready to jump out of the jungle and get you. There were even plants that could choke you to death. We called them wait-a-minute vines. The tendrils were thin and they didn't look like much, but they were prickly in a way that if they brushed against your uniform or your skin, they would grab you. They were nicknamed Wait a Minute because that was what they did. When they got hold of you, you came to a halt, as though the jungle itself were giving you a silent command, hold up, son. They were known to pull soldiers right off of a jeep or off a tank, leaving them suspended, helpless in midair. Once when the 4th Infantry Base Camp came under fire, the general ordered a team of us out to pursue the North Vietnamese forces that had attacked us. They had struck quickly and then retreated back into the bush. We rushed out after them. At one point, we had to make our way down a hill so steep that the only way to manage it was to slide straight down on our asses, using the butt of our M16s like a sort of paddle or cane, or more precisely like a ski pole on an icy downhill. We were coming down in single file, one soldier sliding right behind another. I was flying down the hill and got caught by some wait-a-minute vines. There was a sudden, sharp sound as though the vegetation itself were exhaling. Shoo! And the plant stopped me short. I had a grenade clipped to my belt in back, right above my buttocks, and the vines somehow also halfway pulled out the pin as they caught me. I came down on top of the trigger of the grenade, which meant that it was cocked under me. If the pin came all the way out, that was all she wrote for Threadgill. The vines had me in a stranglehold. I lay there tangled up in an awkward position, watching the other guys slide by me one by one. I was calling for help, but they were skidding so fast they couldn't stop their momentum. I can't go out like this, I thought, not like this. Narcisse was one of the guys coming down after me. He had a machete. When we were going through the thick underbrush, he was one of the soldiers who helped to slash a path open. I'm coming, Henry, he yelled from up the hill. Hold on, I'm behind you. He launched himself down and was able to grab onto something to stop himself near me. He came over and started to cut me out of the vines. Wait, Narcisse, slow up, I warned him. My grenade is loaded. What are you talking about? Narcisse bent down and looked under me and saw what had happened. Oh my goodness, he exclaimed. The other cats were still speeding by, watching us as they passed. Narcisse got down on his knees and reached under me. He fiddled with the grenade for a second and was able to push the pin back in. My brush with the wait a minute made me the clown of the week. If it didn't kill you, that shit was hilarious. The guys were especially tickled by this one because it amounted to a devious play on words, because it wasn't a figure of speech to say that Narcisse had saved my ass. No, this time he had literally saved my behind. And because we're in D.C., one other section, an encounter with the maestro, Duke Ellington. This is in Chicago. Toward the end of July 1971, I go to see Duke Ellington with his orchestra. This is at the High Chaparral, the big ballroom where I perform with the Dells near 77th Street and Stony Island on the South Shore. There are hundreds of people in the crowd, and it's a lavish affair. I know my way around the place, so I slip backstage during the intermission. I'm hoping to be able to say something to him, just to introduce myself and tell him how much I appreciate his music. But I go back there, and there are all these people swarming around him, all these men in tuxedos and high society women in gowns with diamond brooches. Ellington is holding court as only he can, talking to 2 or 3 fans at the same time. Yes, my dear, it's been so long. When was the last time? In Paris? And how is Horace doing these days? Is he still thriving in Antibes? You enjoyed the Goodless Suite. Yes, Mr. Gonzalez is indeed in fine form this evening. I'm so deeply honored that you appreciated our efforts. I stand there for a minute watching him work the crowd. I can't get within 10 feet of him. Oh well, I think. I get it. He's surrounded by money. It's obvious that I'm not supposed to be in the middle of this scrum. All these refined people in their fancy clothes are brazenly shoving each other as they try to get in a word with the great man. The crowd ebbs and flows, and then the current shifts, and I find myself propelled a little closer to him. I don't even realize that he's noticed me, but all of a sudden, he reaches out and grabs me and pulls me next to him. He's got his arm tightly around my waist, like he's about to pull me onto the dance floor for a waltz. I think, what the hell is this? But he's got me, and he's still talking to all these people. He doesn't actually miss a beat in the multiple simultaneous conversations he's having. He doesn't look at me. He just keeps chatting in that debonair way he has. Ah, yes, the weather in Newport was lovely. We just played there 2 weeks ago. Finally, he looks over at me, still clutching me close by the waist. I lean back away from him, stunned by his attention and a little petrified at the same time. So, he says, what do we do? Just like that. I gape at him, astonished by his deployment of the royal we. I have no idea how to introduce myself. Ellington looks back away and continues a conversation with someone else in the crowd. The only thing I know immediately is that I'm not going to tell him I'm a composer. I'm certainly not going to say that. So when he turns back to me, I say, I play woodwinds. My answer only serves to annoy him. I know that, he says. I think to myself, how could you possibly know that I play saxophone? He looks me in the eye. And what else? And then he looks away again, still talking to people around us, still holding me close. After a few more exchanges, he turns back to me. He's waiting for an answer, and I'm in his clutches. So I confess, well, I write music sometimes. Oh, Ellington exclaims with mock surprise, hugging me tighter. We write music sometimes, do we? I don't know what to say now. He's got me, and he's talking, and he's moving and dragging me with him, and the crowd is pressing in around us. Somehow he maneuvers us toward his dressing room door. He's still smooth-talking the aristocrats. Then in a single motion, he enters the dressing room and pulls me inside with him. The door closes, and we're alone. Duke always has a piano in his dressing room when he's on the road. As we spin in through the door, he's pulling me backward into the room, and before I even realize what's happening, he turns me around and sits me down at the piano. Finally, he releases his grip on my waist and takes a step back to sit down on a couch behind me. Ellington leisurely pulls out a cigarillo and lights it and looks hard at me. So, let's hear some of our music, shall we? I'm sitting there looking over my shoulder at him, wondering how he flipped me down in front of the piano. I'm so starstruck that I couldn't play a C major scale to save my life. I'm paralyzed. It does occur to me to play him something I've been working on recently, a piece called Malin, after my son, but I can't even lift my hands up to the keyboard. Duke cracks up, but I can tell he's not making fun of me. He gets it. He can see that I'm nervous because of who he is. He stands up from the couch and puts his hand on my shoulder. I know, he says, smiling. I understand. You can stay, right? Of course I'm planning to stay for the second half of the show. Yes, I'm staying. Let's go back out, he says. It's time. He takes me out and gets me a spot where I can watch the band from the wings. And when he gets ready to hit, he looks over to see if I'm still there. I'm standing right to the side of Harry Carney. I place myself there deliberately to try to get a look at what he's doing on the baritone. Ellington looks over at me with a twinkle in his eye, and then he counts off the band and they start up. We write music sometimes, do we? I'm standing there listening to them launch into the Togo Brava suite, and it occurs to me that maybe it isn't such a bad thing that I froze. Maybe it's lucky I got starstruck. Look what happened to Billy Strayhorn. He was a beast, a genius. He was beyond category, and he got swept up into Ellington's world. What if Duke had made me an offer to work with him as an arranger? I have a feeling that if he had heard the music I was working on at that time, he might well have asked me, and I wouldn't have been able to say no. I'm glad that didn't happen, I tell myself. I'm glad I didn't even have to run that risk. I love him madly, but I can't go work for Duke Ellington. I want to lead my own band and play my own music. I need to work for me.
Thank you, thank you. The book is filled with stories like that. The book is filled with stories like that. The book is it's amazing, and I had a hard time putting it down. The book is like 3 movies, really, and it really is, because you've done so much in your life. What I just want to just start off is like, what was the process like of you two guys working together? And maybe whose idea was it? And I mean, just when you read the book, you say, well, the relationship must be amazing, for you guys to do that. But we can get into the stories. I mean, but you meet just my own personal,
Well, Brent, such a great, Brent is a very great researcher, and I think when we first got together, he had some tapes, I think, of me playing in New York. When I first came to New York with Air, when we played in 1975 or something, 76 or something at La Mama. And he found those tapes. I was shocked, Then he also had some tapes of Julius Hemphill, So that's how that got started. And I don't know when he broached the idea about him writing about the loft jazz scene. I don't know what the order of events were after that, but we began to talk about doing a book. I don't know whose idea it was.
We actually, it's been hard to reconstruct. It's interestingly difficult to reconstruct. But I was starting to work on a book about the downtown jazz scene in New York in the 1970s, and I asked to interview Henry. I introduced myself to him and brought him some archival material of his work from that early period. And then the other step was that you asked me to do an oral history.
Yeah.
At that point, we weren't talking about a book. And this goes back. That first interview was 2006. Oral history was over the next, really, 5 years. So this is a long process. We're talking more than a decade, 15 years spent on in terms of working together toward the book. The oral history, we did multiple sessions over a few years. We weren't meeting every day, but we were meeting periodically for 2-3 hours every time we would meet. And I would do a lot of research for each session and then transcribe them. And I ended up, I still have a transcript of, I think it's about 500 pages from those conversations. And then the mysterious part is somewhere in there, the oral history, which is a particular form, because an oral history is a conversation. An oral history is a back and forth, it's dialogic. To write a book in someone's voice, this really is an autobiography, is a totally different enterprise. At some point, things morphed, and we thought, let's try this as a book project. And then it became a task of taking those hundreds of pages and trying to figure out how to rework them into a literary form.
That was
that was me.
I was because when you read it, it reads it almost like, you know, certain chapters, they read like movie scripts. I mean, it's like, it's so put together so well. So thank you. It's amazing. It's really good.
That's the way. That's Henry's talent as a storyteller. He tells them, and they sound like movie scripts.
Right. But I would just like to start, you know, we heard that Vietnam story. I would just like to find out, how did you actually get to Vietnam?
That story's in the book too. I was in Fort Riley, Kansas. That was the first place I was assigned after basic training. And I was in one band, and then I got promoted to the top band on the post of the general's band. And I was given the job of a ranger. And only one other person had had that job before me. And that, I don't even know if that position even exists anymore. The guy that had that job before me was a drummer from Ohio, from where? Cleveland. He had been a drummer on the Johnny Carson show. He was a composer and a percussionist. In World War II, he got the Silver Star for bravery in the Aleutian Islands as a ranger. So I had this position, and they asked me to write a medley of pieces that was going to be performed in Kansas City for the governor, the mayor, the Archbishop of the Midwest, business community, all the big military dignitaries, mostly generals. And I wrote it, and the bandmaster was away at the time. We were rehearsing it, and it was a sergeant conducting it, and so he wasn't making any evaluations about the music. The band loved the music, and he thought that that was enough. So the band leader, band leader, was going to conduct the piece at the premiere. As we say, he did it on the fly. So he came in for a week, went to Kansas City, and at that time, also, I didn't even have to wear a uniform. When they gave me that position, I wore civilian clothes. I was in the Army, but I wasn't in the Army. And so when we got there, I was standing on the sidelines like everybody else waiting for the band to play. And the band struck up. I don't know, they hadn't got 8 bars, and the Archbishop jumped up and said, "Who's responsible for this blasphemy?" Shut everything down. And the bandmaster was so scared because there was generals and everybody. He looked, all he could do is point to me and say, "He did it." I was on the sidelines, and he pointed to me in the crowd. "He did it. He's the one that did it." I said, "Whoa, what is this about, you know?" So they told the band to pack up and get out. So we were packing up, they were leaving, and I came up on the bus getting a real cold shoulder, big draft, you know. And so one of the officers said, "Thurgood, you back in the band tomorrow, back in your clarinet sections, in your clarinet role." I said, "Are you kidding me? I got to put those clothes back on?" He said, "That's right." And so the next day, there's a band rehearsal at 9 o'clock. There's another band rehearsal at 1 o'clock. This is the concert band, sit-down band. When we go out, it's a marching band. So I go in. I'm in my second, I think I was playing second clarinet at the time or something. And we took lunch, came back at 1 o'clock. We sat down. We were getting ready to play, and the door opened, and the guy come in dressed greens with a briefcase with handcuffs on it. Pulls out a key. They called us to attention, pulled out a key and pulled out these papers, and he started reading in that language that nobody can understand. Sound like you had a hall call, you know. So and so, blah, 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 according to the so-and-so, private. I was a private. Private Henry Threadgill been assigned. I said, "Who?" He said, "Yeah, Private Henry Threadgill been removed to the 4th Infantry Division, play cool. I said, where the hell is that? And so when they say, you got 30 days to get your life in order to go back to Chicago and get your life in order, report to California, you're now part of the 4th Infantry Division. I told you, and I jumped out, I said, you can't do this to me. I got my rights. I said, I'm a clarinet player, and I'm in high demand. They said, take it to your lawyer, but you better go home and get your life in order. You got 30 days. So that's how I ended up in Vietnam.
Wow. Wow.
I wrote, I said,
For a piece of music.
but I always say, music can get you killed.
Do you have the score of that medley?
I did. You know, one of my young cousins or nephews or somebody got their hands on it. I left that score in the basement at my grandmother's house. It had been there for years, and then I went looking for it some years after I got out of the service. I think I went looking for it around 1973 or 74, and it wasn't there. You know, it wasn't good, really. But it was what I was doing at the time. But I would like to have kept it because what it stood for, a chapter in my life, a dangerous chapter in my life. You know, so I wish I still had it. You know.
Yeah. Like Brent was saying, it's 2 chapters in the book, 2.5 chapters on Vietnam. So that's a huge, you know, that's a huge part of your life. And I think I know you said the titles don't actually mean what the music is about. But I know several of your titles of your music, especially in the early 70s, kind of, you know, in the 70s, kind of, you know, I could, you know, because I've read the book, some of those titles kind of reflect some of the, you know, some of the things that were, you know, that occurred, you know. I don't know if you want to tell this, but I thought this story was just another amazing story about Vietnam. Is how you were on the back of a helicopter with a gun on a toggle.
Yeah. Well, I was. We had like a. I had. Let me put it. I was with a. I was in the 4th Infantry, 4th Infantry band. I had a contract with the government, number one, like doctors. See, I volunteered for the draft because they were drafting me. If they'd have drafted me, I would have had no choices as to what I was going to do. If you volunteer for the draft or volunteer, you can get a contract with the government to be a shoe shine boy, a brain surgeon, anything you want to be. But you can never beat the government. They're going to win in the end. So I thought, that's why I said, I'll sue you, you know, because I said I have my agreement. Well, they didn't say I couldn't have two things that I could do. That's why they got me, see. So I was a saxophone clarinet player, and then they made me a shotgun, see. So I drifted from you. What was that? The helicopter. Yeah, the helicopter. So like I went for audition. They had been, you know, Bob Hope used to bring the big reviews there with James Brown band, Les Brown band, renowned that year, and Rachel Welch. She was the dancer that year. I forget. It was every year would be different people he would bring over. So some of the musicians got sick, and General Westmoreland, who was the head of all the forces, put out a request for musicians to come to Saigon to audition for these 2 bands to fill the chairs. So I said, I'm going. And nobody's stopping me either. So they were trying to stop me, but I had to pull up this letter about Westmoreland. They had to let me go. So I got the job, but it didn't last but a minute, so I went into worked in the television studio with the band, and they put together a small group of musicians to keep touring when the USO show left. And so we were out touring the country, all over the country, playing for in different situations. And we were down in the Mekong Delta, and it was, I mean, I'd never been any place this hot in my life. This is the first time I've ever seen black people peel. Wow. I'm not kidding. You know, I thought only white people could peel. It was so hot down there, black people would peel it, I'm telling you. And it was a flatbed boat with one spot on it for the guy that was operating it. And we had to get down that river to get back inland some kind of way. So when we got on the boat, everybody it was me and a drummer that was a black guy. Everybody on that band passed out except me. Everybody had heat stroke except me. I don't know why. There was no shade. So when we landed, a helicopter came in and picked all of them up. It took them to the hospital. So then I had to try to make my way back to, I think I was trying to get back to Saigon or something. So I waited for a lift on we call it a LZ, a landing zone. And I picked up a helicopter. So the helicopter driver picked me up and we took off. Here's the river. And we started going down, flying down the river. And you got all of those, you know, the weeds and bushes that come up out of the water. So the enemy, Charlie as we call him, is down in there. And they popping up out of there, shooting, trying to bring the helicopter down, right? So this guy's dodging. I don't like helicopters, so this guy starts this evasive action, turning upside down and all of this kind of stuff, right? You know, and so he looks back at me and says, "You better get on that gun and get them off my ass," you know. And I said, "Man, I don't know if I can shoot this gun. I know how to shoot something, but I never." See, it was on a rotating pedestal, so it's all over the place, and he's flying upside down, sideways, all of this kind of stuff. So he said, "You know how to load it?" I said, "Yeah, I know how to load it," you know. So he said, "Well, you better hurry up and get on." I said, "I'm not sure." He pulled his .45 out and pointed and said, "If you don't get them off my ass, I'm going to do something to yours," or something like that, right? I said, "You got it." So I loaded it. He made some wild turn. When I loaded it, it didn't have a trigger. It had like, you squeeze it. You had these two rods that you squeeze. So when I did that, I shot out all the windows. Shot out all the windows and shot off the tip of one of the blades. He ducked. He was next to me. He said, he turned around, he's going to threaten me again. I turned that thing in. I said, "I wouldn't do that if I was you." He looked down, he saw that thing, but he looked down at me and said, "Okay." So to get back at me, when we got to, I think it was Saigon, it might have been somewhere else. He was letting me out. He wouldn't come all the way down to the ground. I knew what he was trying to do. I knew he was going to try to clip me. So what that means is, they let you out, and then they turn the helicopter sideways, so the blade. So I knew he was going to. So when I jumped out like this. You know, I jumped out in like a 45-degree angle with my knees up like that because I knew he was going to try to get me. You know, and he pulled away.
Wow. That was a great, recant of the story, but it's a little PG. So you gotta read the story in the book to get the whole, the raw end of it. But that's amazing.
But
story.
you know, let me tell you, in the book, people never really asked about one section of the book the most thrilling part of my life was when I was a kid, going out to hear music. That was the most exciting thing in my life ever. I can't remember anything like that to equal that,
There's one story in the book you said you was in I think grammar school, 7th grade or whatever, and the teacher used to play music,
right?
Like in the afternoon. It's
yep.
like because it was kind of like you say you was 7th and 8th grade. That was kind of old to be taking a nap,
right.
But he would make y'all take a nap, and you talk about that.
But when I was going out at night to hear music when I got to high school. It was just me and one other. I had a friend named Marlington Davis played drums. We were the only one. It was like being on 52nd Street in New York, 63rd and Cottage Grove. It went from King Drive all the way to the lake. It was so many ballrooms, nightclubs, places. It was unbelievable. and the lights, the neon lights. I mean, I remember getting up there, and you get off the train and say, "Oh my God, I'm in heaven," you know. I mean, you know, Conor McRae standing here, Ben Webster standing there, Miles over here, Dexter over here, you know, Ahmed Jamal over here, Count Basie around the corner, Sonny Stitt over here, all the way across the city, like that one section of Chicago. So this was I was about 15, I guess. I had to wait till everybody go to sleep in the house, and I would climb out the window, second floor, with my tenor saxophone, and then I had to go about 2 miles to get to the end of the L train line. And then I would have to climb up that pole and listen to see if any trains would come, and push my saxophone up through the tracks, because I didn't have any money, and then put it up on the platform, jump on the platform, go to another station, transfer, get the train to 63rd and Cottage Grove, and come downstairs and go to all of the clubs. And well, all of the people knew me. They knew I was that kid. They didn't care. They said he's gonna be all right. He's gonna be able to play. So all I had to do was just sit down, and they would say, "No drinking for you." That's right. I said, "That's right, Coca-Cola," you know. And I had to do the same trick. I had to go toward the lake at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, climb up, try to wait till the police went by so I could climb up to the top of the train tracks, get back on up there, go back, and make the train to go back to 63rd in Loomis. My man there that went to school over there, Lynn Bloom, he knows what Loomis was, and walk from there to 59th and Sangamon, put my horn back through the window, have about an hour and a half in the bed, and they'd be saying, "Time to get up and go to school." Consequently, I failed every class in my life. I did. Every class before 12 o'clock, I failed. There was never a class I ever passed, because I was dead every morning, because I was out every night. Consequently, I went to school, to summer school and night school. All year, everybody had vacations, and I was never out of school. I was never out of school for 4 years. And what was the biggest shock, the kids, I actually graduated with the kids that I started with, they couldn't believe it. You know? They had even put me out of school, and they brought my mother up and told us there's something wrong with me. They couldn't understand. They say, "Henry has all failures and got the best grades in the afternoon." They said, "You need to have him talk to somebody."
What the name of you had the name of a saxophone player stenciled on your tenor saxophone case.
Sonny Rollins. Yeah, that's my good friend. Oh. Yeah, still my good friend.
I call Sonny Rollins one of the, you know, in the music that he plays, like the last great improviser, you know, because he plays in the moment. Just like your music and the way you write with the textures, it's like it's in the moment, it's not preconceived. Actually, you speak about, you know, in the book about that preconceived types of things and devices. You try to, you know, you come up with your own system, you know. Yeah. Anyway, so I thought that was, when I read that about Sonny Rollins, I feel the same way about him, you know.
Yeah, well, you see, he spent a lot of time in Chicago, you know that. Right. Well, all of the tenor players, Chicago was a tenor player town. All of the tenor players used to come to Chicago. That's why I heard all of them. But all of them was theirs. Von Freeman, Johnny Griffin, Gene Ammons, all of them were there. John Gilmore, E. Parker McDougall, Clifford Jordan, you know, Swing Lee, Jay Peters, on and on and on. And the others that came there from other places, like Yusuf Lateef, Sonny Stitt, Dexter Gordon, they all were there. Sonny Rollins. That was the tenor players' town. Lester Young used to stay in Chicago probably as much as Charlie Parker did. You know, the two of them lived in Chicago almost. You know, but that was before my time. I didn't catch Charlie Parker. I was too young. You know, but because I got out on the street, like I said, I was about 15 at the time. You know.
There's
heard enough.
Henry, you need to explain this, because if you know Henry's music, you're thinking, wait, Henry Threadgill is an alto player.
Yeah.
but his first love was the tenor. You need to tell that story of how you got from tenor to alto.
But I ended up playing I played alto, tenor, and baritone. But I was basically started out as a tenor player, like you said. And when I started playing, I went with the Church of God, Sanctified Church of God in Chicago, and then went on to travel with Horace Shepherd out of Philadelphia, the Boy Wonder preacher. I had been playing with Left Hand Frank, Otis Rush, and people like that. See, playing tenor in Chicago at the Blue Flame. You know, I was in the house band that's the blues joint in Chicago. So when Reverend Morris at the church, he asked me when I joined the church to come up and play His Eyes Is on the Sparrow. So I went up there and played it on the tenor, and like, this is a sanctified church now, right? So I played it, and people, the reaction, that's what the reaction, something. I said, oh man, this was chilly. I said, this is really chilly. And so the minister called me over, he said, Henry, look up on the pulpit, I got another saxophone there. He said, why don't you go take it and get it fixed up? I'll pay for it. I didn't even know what he was talking about. I put it out, I said, oh, it's an alto, you know. So I got it fixed up, came back, and told him, I said, well, here it is. I said, what do you want me to do? He said, play that song again. I said, which one? He said, you know, His Eyes Is on the Sparrow. So I went and played that on the alto. And they said, yeah. People said, oh, yeah. Or some people was talking while I was playing, and different things was going on. I said, oh, so that's what it is. People couldn't hear the tenor saxophone. That's a blues horn. It's too low. You know, all of them big gospel singers are mostly alto singers. The alto voice is the voice in the gospel church. That's where everything is centered around the alto. In the choir, Aretha is an alto singer. She can go up, and all of them are alto singers. The meat in the choir is in the alto section too. Wow. You know, so they can hear the alto, but they couldn't. The tenor is blues horn, like I said. It's down deeper, you know. When I was with Left Hand Frank, I remember at the Flame, and Frank would. He didn't care about me playing outside, playing way out things on the blues. But this is a hardcore blues joint. This is the Flame, and so it was the blues world. The jam session starts on Sunday afternoon and ends on Monday morning. Jazz guys have a jam session on Monday nights. They started about 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon and come out the next morning. So I was playing, and this woman I thought she was drunk. And she had her head down on the bar like this. Now, I'm just going to quote this language. She raised up, but she had on a man's sport coat. She put her hands in her pocket and she said, young MF, she called me, she said, if you don't play the blues, I'll cut you where you was. I said, where I was? She gonna cut me yesterday? I stopped playing what I was doing. I stopped playing. I knew what she wanted me to do, and that's what I started doing.
Real quick, when I read the story about you switching to playing alto in church, my wife sitting right over here, she can attest to it. I said, I'm never playing tenor in church again. I said that because I just played in church for a MLK service, a couple of weeks ago, and I played tenor, and I got the kind of response that you. So I'm gonna fix up an alto and go in there next time. Yeah.
Should we open it up?
Yeah. We got a mic.
I see a hand back on that side, or there's one there.
Good evening, gentlemen. Mr. Threadgill, I think Mr. Paul mentioned, Mr. Paul Cobb mentioned that you played with the Dells at one point.
Yeah, for a long time.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the Dells had an orchestra. You know, all the groups, you know, like B.B. King had a big band. All of those big singing groups all had orchestras, small orchestras, you know. Especially the ones that had names that could afford it, you know.
Hi there. This is wonderful. Thank you so much. As a social worker who's worked at the VA for many years with many Vietnam veterans, I want to thank you for your service, first of all. Also, I am from New Orleans, and I'm just curious if you have any anecdotes or stories about any New Orleans jazz musicians you've played with, or any experiences you've ever had playing in New Orleans. Thank you.
I'm sorry, she's
In New Orleans. Any stories
In New
about
Orleans?
playing with people from New Orleans or in New Orleans?
No, I never been to New Orleans. I played with a number of musicians from New Orleans, but I've never been in New Orleans. That's one of the few places I haven't been in the United States.
Got to get you there.
Well, New Orleans is, you know the history of this music. Part of it comes from New Orleans, not all of it. Part of it comes from here. This is the East Coast branch of the music, Washington, D.C. There's three rivers of music: New Orleans, the Midwest, and the East Coast. It was like three tribes or something, you know. And a lot of people think that all of the music came out of New Orleans. The music that I play, that I grew up learning how to play, I'm from Chicago. That music comes from Kansas City. It's Charlie Parker, all of them come out of Kansas City. Everybody come out of Kansas City. That music came up the river. That's where we learned it. Kansas City brought it up to Chicago, on to Detroit, you know, and St. Louis. You know. But New Orleans had this another approach, and it's Jimmy Lunceford, Duke, and all of them, what they brought from this side was a whole nother approach. Even like I was saying, it was just a whole nother way of thinking, you know. The Midwest had this, you know, the blues and these shout bands and stuff like that, you know. And the blues, that was the other thing, too, that was so interesting about New York when I went there. And I used to even notice on the record, see, because I'm from Chicago, we had the blues in Chicago. I'm talking about the blues from, I'm talking about, you know, Howlin' Wolf, Mississippi blues, you know, Muddy Water, that blues. That's the blues I grew up with, the same as what I was hearing with Haler Jackson, James Cleveland, all the different people were singing in Chicago. It was the same thing, but that was not in the music in New York. They didn't play them. They played instrumental blues. We had blues that was 5 bars long. 7-bar blues. You know, sometimes it didn't have no bars. It would just be the blues. You know, see, I was struck by the blues before I was struck by jazz. I mean, because Howlin' Wolf was the biggest thing in the world, as far as I was concerned. Sunday mornings, I couldn't wait to go to Jewtown. Jewtown was Maxwell Street was a market in Chicago where they sold everything. But it was a big Jewish community that traded there, you know. And my grandfather would take his grandkids there with him on Sunday morning, and I would invariably disappear. As soon as the blues would start up, that's where I'd be standing, especially if it was Howlin' Wolf. I'd be standing in front of Howlin' Wolf. My grandfather couldn't find me, you know. It'd be 7, 8 in the morning. They'd be on the platform playing the blues, drinking whiskey, with fifths of whiskey on the floor. At 7, 8 in the morning. I mean, really playing the blues, you know. Muddy Waters, you know. But so I realized that wasn't in New York, this kind of blues. They had this sophisticated instrumental version of 1/4, 1/4/5, all this kind of stuff. I started to change my whole ideas about what the blues were because of that. how to play the blues a whole nother kind of way. The blues is really an attitude. It's not a particular form. People think it's a form. It's not a rigid form. It can take form, but it's not that rigid. It's people that made it, you know.
So what do you think about the way, is there any questions from, I'm sorry, I'm in a trance up here, I'm sorry. Any questions?
Ooh, I'm sorry. I had a question in the spirit of the previous question and your response. I'm over this way. But I'm from Ohio, Toledo, Ohio at that, and Detroit, and hearing some of your stories and things like that reminds me of one of my late uncles who was into music and things like that. So I kind of wanted to know if you had any stories of that area, Detroit, Cleveland, Toledo, or anything like that, if that's familiar.
Not Toledo. I used to play in Detroit with Air. We used to play in Detroit. I used to also play in Detroit way before that, because like I said, I used to play with the Dells. That was one of the main Henry Street Playhouse down on Finkel Street in Detroit, you know. But Air, we used to play John Sinclair, who ran the jazz festivals and the different events in Detroit, you know. But not Toledo.
No, part of what's amazing about Henry's background is that this is a different model of jazz education. What it means to become a professional musician, that his background, his upbringing, and his formation is so eclectic. So he's playing in blues band. He hasn't even told, it's in the book, but he was playing with polka bands. He was playing Latin music. All these different kinds of exposure, playing in parades with the Shriners, all these things, as well as the soundscape of Vietnam, made Henry into the composer that he is. And it's very different from going to Berklee School of Music or Juilliard or Manhattan School of Music. So that's, to me, it's one of the more remarkable things about the book is the eclecticism of everything that went into your sound.
To the
Sorry.
AACM, we had a policy in the AACM. We were interested in making instruments, new instruments, but we also were interested in exploring the world for more cultural information, and we would push young people and young members out to leave Chicago and to go all over the world. We sent people to Africa, Japan. When I left, I went to Venezuela, from Venezuela to Trinidad. I worked down in that area. Other people went to Spain, Nigeria, all kinds of places. And then we would come back to Chicago with what we had learned and try to put that information into the bigger picture of what we knew that we could share with the other artists, you know.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the music that you wrote that got you in trouble in the Army. What was it they didn't like? I mean, was it too outside, too avant-garde, or just what was this?
Yeah, at that time, I was really interested. I was trying to fuse what I had learned about Stravinsky. I was trying to fuse that with stuff I was trying to put together about Cecil Taylor. I was trying to put those two together, you know, and so it was really cacophonous. I mean, I loved it, but, you know, I was trying to find out how to put this stuff together, and, like, I just told those people that they lacked a sense of humor.
And I don't think you said what the arrangement was of, what you were arranging.
Right.
He was arranging patriotic songs.
Yeah.
So it's America the Beautiful, My Country 'Tis of Thee,
Yep, that's the-
through the
that's-
lens of Stravinsky and Cecil Taylor.
That's the material I was arranging, right?
Hello, I have a question. I'm in the center. As is with writing a book, I understand you have to cover a lot of time in a short period. If you could choose one section that was the hardest to consolidate, or if you could do a second book just covering this part of your life, what would you choose to cover?
I think that's a question for Brent.
It's for you too. I'm thinking about different sections. There were, I mean, we all know how memory works. Memory doesn't work in a linear fashion. Henry has a quite extraordinary memory and can talk in great detail and tell stories about particular parts of his life, but then there's some broad stroke, and that's where my research had to come in. Was that in 1974 or 1972? That kind of stuff I had to figure out. And there were particular parts of Henry's path that there was so much going on. Like the early 1980s, there were particular periods that there was, that period in the mid-70s also, when you go to Venezuela and Trinidad, it was hard to unpack, and we could have gone deeper, but there were so many bases to cover that it was a real challenge. And the other thing, I think memory changes as you grow older. So some of the vivid stories that Henry's been recounting and that are in the book from his teenage years and his 20s, and certainly the Vietnam era, I think it's right to say that you remember, it's not that your memory is less vivid, but you don't have those kinds of anecdotes about the early 2000s, say. So that was a challenge. And for me, it does come up to the present, the book, but because Henry's music develops in multiple sound worlds, it's not just the maturation of a single vision. He's shifted visions multiple times to a degree that I think in this music is only paralleled by Miles Davis. I can't think of another composer who has shifted gears, shifted bands and sound palettes. A band with multiple basses and multiple flutes, to a trio like that's his band X75, to a trio like Air, that's just Henry on reeds and bass and drums. Just totally different palettes to work with as a composer. And Henry's done that over and over again throughout his career. The last period that's now been going on for a while with one of his current groups, Zuid, also marked all these periods did, but the last period marked a real shift in his compositional vocabulary, like the way he puts his music together. And covering that, I feel like we could do another book just about the intervallic language, about this compositional language you've developed and your more recent music and your multimedia work, the film and the roulette performance, the stuff we were talking about earlier today. This chapter of the last 20 years is another book. I don't know if I'm proposing anything, but there's a whole universe, a galaxy in just this recent period of Henry's work that it is there in the end of Easily Slip, in the end of this book, but I feel like that's another book that we didn't quite get to. There was one other.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Or where did the mic go? Okay, this will be the last question.
He's from Chicago.
Thank you for that.
I heard it.
With the challenges that jazz has to be a popular music today, what was the motivation, when AACM, what was the motivation behind deciding to do music from that angle?
Well, what happened was they turned us into outlaws. They wouldn't let, the clubs and different places wouldn't let us play our music in the establishments. They wanted us to only play what everybody else was playing. Irving Berlin, blah, 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 so-and-so, Cherokee, something about Charlie Park or somebody, We said, we had that. I said, what about us? And so when they kicked us out, then we started creating places for ourselves to play, putting our money together, buying machines to print material, getting instruments for children to teach them a different way to think. And that's how it was. They did us a favor by kicking us out. I'm so glad they kicked us out. That's always the best, you know. It's like failure, you know. That was the other name of this book. That's the greatest thing in the world can happen to you, failure. Nothing like it. It's sad that people don't really understand that now, and will make young people feel like they're less than something because they failed at something. There's nothing wrong with failing at something. It just means that you need to go and do some work. You know, so you brought the dishes out and they were dirty, and I'm not supposed to say anything about it. I'm supposed to eat off of this stuff and don't say, oh, that was sweet, that was nice, you know. Plates are filthy. Get back in there and wash the dishes right. You know. I mean, that's what happened to me. I went down, I was a kid. You know, kids get their feelings hurt real easy, you know, especially when you're a teenager. I went to play with this professional, it was a professional band they just played for their own entertainment. And when I went to play with them, this was an all-white band, all successful white musicians with boats, houses, and everything in Chicago. When I went to play with that band, just to rehearse with them, they beat me up so bad. It was at the square. They called out some music, called a piece of music, and the guy would count off the piece of music. I get the first note, and that would be it. Pop, boom. They go through the whole piece of music, call out the next one. First note, boom. That's it. I couldn't play nothing else. I was so mad I jumped up, packed up my horn, and went out the door and slammed the door. Right. My teacher called me up and said, I heard what happened. He said, are you going to take it? I didn't say anything. I told my mother I was moving to the basement. I had some people come and move the piano out of the house and move it to the basement. I went to the basement, closed off all the windows and taped them up. All my friends would come by and ask my mother and grandmother, say, Henry don't like us no more. He don't want to come out and play or talk to anybody. They say, he'll be back. I said, I'm not coming out until I get this stuff fixed. Because, I mean, you know, when you're that age and have made a decision about what you want to do in life, you got to resolve that. You really have to resolve it. So I stayed down there for the entire summer. When September came, I went back downtown, and I made it. See, that's what failure did. That's what failure did for me. See, that's what it's such a powerful motivator, you know, rather than trying to make somebody feel bad about the fact that they failed or something. You need to say, you need to do something about the failure. Don't be trying to put them down. This is a chance for you to go from 90 to 100. Some of these people pass at 90 and 80 and 85. You can come back and be at 150. See? And what it did was, too, it upped my understanding of what I needed to learn later on. When I finished high school and went on to junior college and city colleges and universities and conservatories, I knew what I had to do there. So when I got to the conservatories and different places, I didn't go to the school to get a degree. I went to school to get every class that they had. Every class that they had. That's what I wanted. Every piece of information you got. And that's what I did. I kept changing majors until I took everything in the undergraduate, and I was in the graduate, and I still didn't have a degree. I said, what do I need it for? I need some information. They're putting people out of school in 4 years. I say, so you think that in 4 years you can do what Beethoven or Duke Ellington did? With that piece, they gave you 15 classes out of 200, and you think you can do what Bach did? I said, no, no thank you. I just take all the information. You keep the degrees.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Henry Threadgill and Brett Hayes, thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul Carr. Brent Hayes Edwards and Mr. Threadgill will be on the 5th floor to sign and continue the conversation. There are 50 copies of his book, brought to you by the DC Public Library Foundation. And stay around for the Paul Carr Legacy Quartet. If you're not a DC Public Library card holder, we encourage you to do so. Get our newsletter with additional information on events throughout the year. Tomorrow, we will have HBCU Made Author Talk with Aisha Rasco from National Public Radio in conversation with Nicole Hannah-Jones. February 15th, we have authors of What Have We Here in the auditorium with actor and artist Billy D. Williams.
Mr. Carr, yes, sir. Meantime, we were supposed to start playing. Okay, yes. You gotta start with blues then, man. Yeah, yeah.
and educators, and Mr. Calvin Jones. So we're gonna do CJ. So we're gonna do another one by me, and this one's called Straight Ahead Soul. So just like Mr. Threadgill said, you can't get the title. You can't, the title might or might not connect with the music. Yeah.
said happiness is a thing called Joe? Called Joe. Like a cup of Joe, I guess.